I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same. Yo guys, what's up? Welcome back to Music Versus. This week we're talking about Kendrick Lamar and more specifically Good Kid, M.A.A.D City versus To Pimp a Butterfly. So let's start with Kendrick Lamar, the person. So Kendrick Lamar is a rapper from California. He sort of reinvigorated the West Coast scene and has been the leader of the more conscious rap, talking about political and social issues, especially in his To Pimp a Butterfly album. So I think we should start chronologically and begin with Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. So Good Kid, M.A.A.D City is Kendrick Lamar's second album, his first album being Section 80, which was a very good debut album. The song I love there, High Power, that was when I first got introduced to Kendrick Lamar around 2010. Production on there is pretty decent, but let's not drift too much off. So Good Kid, M.A.A.D City, basically with this album what it sets out to do is to tell the story of Kendrick Lamar within his city, the craziness that goes on in his city, and how he is a good kid. But however, what's interesting with this album is that it sort of contradicts itself and kind of sets out to make Kendrick Lamar not to be this good kid that he portrays himself. And within one of the songs, I think it was on M.A.A.D City, he says actually, if I had told you I had killed a nigga at 16, would you still see me to be this innocent child? So with this album, what I love is the depth with which Kendrick Lamar narrates his own personal story. Now, if you've been watching videos on this channel or if you've watched other videos, you'll see that I'm heavy on authenticity and the connection I have with an artist and that legitimate feel you get when you listen to an artist's music. And I feel like with Good Kid, M.A.A.D City, Kendrick Lamar was able to articulate it in such a masterful way, which I believe was primarily responsible for making this album so successful. Kendrick Lamar was narrating with vivid imagery, situations and various instances and occurrences around his life. He was talking about peer pressure, he was talking about the death of his friends and how that affected him. He was talking about the ladies in his life. He also infused skits within the songs. Now, and when I was talking about Frank Ocean's album, I had talked about how I liked the way Kendrick Lamar had done his skits on this album, Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. So with the skits on this album, they're kind of infused or part and parcel of the songs. So they're not separate entities, but are really part of the songs themselves and do an excellent job at transitioning between songs. Now, a particular skit or song that I can't listen to on this album without being emotional is Real, simply because of the words of Kendrick Lamar's mother. So on that song, Kendrick's mother is telling him that despite going through what he's gone through, he should always persevere and come back and tell the kids in his city his story. Now that got me very emotional and still gets me very emotional. But just that personal touch, just that, you know, depth with which he explains his story was what I think made this album so gripping. Not to talk about the production, which was phenomenal. So moving on to Pimp A Butterfly. This was Kendrick's third album. This album was very heavily politically charged. And I think part of the reason for this was the state of mind, not just within Kendrick Lamar, but in America in general. You know, you had Ferguson, you had all these racial tensions at boiling point, and Kendrick Lamar, being a conscious person, decided to speak on them, and I think that's what drove the direction of this album. With the production, there's heavy jazz and funk instrumentation, which I think turned off a lot of people. I personally enjoyed it. I like funk, I like jazz. I think it did have this nice and groovy feel to it. Now, Kendrick Lamar is not new to jazzy instrumentations or production in songs like Rigor Mortis, and even with his first album, he had a lot of jazzy instrumentation, and even on Good Kid, M.A.A.D City, there were little jazz infusions and inflections here and there. Now, with To Pimp A Butterfly, like I said, it was politically and socially charged. He's talking about racism, he's talking about racism. Now, something I will say here, which shows you just how clever Kendrick Lamar is was that he was able to pull an All Lives Matter onto Pimp A Butterfly, and not many people were outraged. He said, I think it was on the song Blacker the Berry, "So why did I weep when Trayvon was killed in the street, when gang banging make me kill a nigga blacker than me?" This was an interesting line. Do I completely agree with Kendrick here? Not 100%, but I get what he was trying to say. And just because of how clever he was able to word it, not many people were outraged by this. That was kind of an all lives matter thing to say, even though Kendrick Lamar obviously is for Black Lives Matter. With this album, To Pimp a Butterfly, very jazzy, very political. The transitioning between here is tied together by sort of a poem. "I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same." That's sort of what ties this album together. With this album though, it's not as personal as with Good Kid, Mad City. There are little stories thrown here and there, but most of it is sort of an outlook on society and sort of like moral advice or just rants about how society is. So now let's go into the comparison. Let's start with lyricism. I think both albums, Kendrick Lamar is a very capable rapper and a talented writer. I would say with To Pimp a Butterfly, there was a lot of nuance within the writing. There was a lot of different interpretations to the songs. With Good Kid, Mad City, it wasn't too deep. It was deep, it was decently deep, but it wasn't too deep because he was trying to tell you his story. So there was a decent level of you understanding what he was saying. With To Pimp a Butterfly, you really needed to sit there and assimilate all that was being said in order to have a full comprehension of it. So that it was more nuanced. You could say that the lyrics there were more detailed and deeper on To Pimp a Butterfly than they were on Good Kid, Mad City. Now, do I think this is justification for people saying things like, "You don't like To Pimp a Butterfly because you don't get it"? Like, no. Some people just don't like that style of music. Another thing, if we're to compare, comparatively between Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly, I would say that Good Kid, Mad City was more balanced. When I speak of balance, I speak of a wide array of subject topics to discuss within your album that still ties together. On Good Kid, Mad City, it would make you cry, it would make you laugh, or at least me, it would make me laugh, like when Kendrick's dad would say, "Where my motherfucking dominoes at?" And then you listen to a song like Real and that would make you cry. And then you listen to a song like Backseat Freestyle, which was, would get you all turned up. And even songs that were turned up, such as Good Kid, Mad City, actually had meaning to them. On To Pimp a Butterfly, when I was listening to this, I was down because I was like, shit. Understanding most of what he was saying and knowing how society works, it made me depressed that we live in a world such as this. It made me angry, and there was very little relief, except maybe on songs like and I didn't particularly like the version of that was on this album. Moving on to production, like I said, while Good Kid, Mad City, you could say, has a bit of a more contemporary hip-hop sound in there. It sounds like the production of what we're listening to now, the production sounds modern. With To Pimp a Butterfly, like I said, it's very jazzy, very funky, feels, slightly antique. It feels like you have this classical feel to it, especially on songs like the intro, where you feel like you're playing a vinyl record and that cracking in the beginning. So I would say that was a nice touch there. With production, I don't know where I lean with this. I don't know if I would give it to Good Kid, Mad City. I think I'd give it to Pimp a Butterfly. The inflections and the little subtle changes on To Pimp a Butterfly was very immersive and very creative, I would say, and a great amount of effort was spent in creating these songs. So I would say, in terms of production, To Pimp a Butterfly would get it. So far we've talked about lyricism, which To Pimp a Butterfly I think does better. Balance, I would say Good Kid, Mad City. Production, I would say To Pimp a Butterfly. Now, the final thing on my personal opinions. So personally, and I'm sure you would have sort of come to your own conclusion by watching what I've said so far, I would have to go with Good Kid, Mad City. Good Kid, Mad City, not just because it's balanced, but because of how unique it sounded. And this might sound strange to you, but it sounded very unique that an individual could be as open about his entire life story and could choreograph it in a way that is so cohesive as in Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. While To Pimp a Butterfly is a phenomenal album, I don't think it tells you who Kendrick is. It sort of is a book talking about things, but it isn't talking specifically about Kendrick. Whereas Good Kid, M.A.A.D City talks specifically about Kendrick. And you gain so much information about him that you feel a personal relationship and you can see yourself in certain songs. You can feel like even when his parents are talking, again, I can hear my parents saying the exact same words to me. It gives me that kind of relationship, you know. On a song like Black Boy Fly, where he's talking about a student who's always in the library. I can remember in secondary school, the student who was always in the library, even though that student was me myself. But still, it was something that I could relate to. Everything just tied together. It was very seamless and very well constructed, and it felt very fluid and authentic to who Kendrick Lamar was as a person. So final judgment, not to take anything away from the master To Pimp a Butterfly, is, I think these are both phenomenally good albums, but I would have to go with Good Kid, M.A.A.D City here, purely because of the reasons I stated earlier. I think so far, in my opinion, this would be Kendrick Lamar's best album. Let me know in the comment section which album you think is better and your reasons for choosing that. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you're new around here, why not click subscribe and check out some of my other content. My name is Ijaji Prime. I hope you have a blessed day and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.